Hello, welcome to our first Arche Podcast. My name is John.
And I'm Pastor Pete.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about our ministry at Arche, but also the intergenerational component that I'm sure if you guys have been at our church, is something that you've heard time and time again. And we'll kind of start off with, Pastor Pete, like why we're doing this and kind of like the purpose of this platform, this podcast, and all of that. So could you tell me a little bit more about intergenerational ministries as well as, the purpose of this podcast?
Yeah, let's first talk about the purpose a little bit. I think generally what we like to do is we like to definitely have engaging and good conversations with people as we kind of live this Christian life. I think it's really important. And a lot of the times in church, most of the conversation is kind of one way unless you happen to come into my office or we grab some coffee or things like that. And also, I think with other people, young professionals, people, teachers, and other people, the conversation tends to be kind of one, unilateral, kind of one direction. And so we wanted to have a platform where we can talk about different things that people want to talk about. I think, things that people are interested in. And so we wanted to create this podcast so that people can kind of come up with topics, send in questions. Chris, who's kind of managing and editing, kind of doing all this, he'll kind of come up with, the topics, and we'll try to record every once in a while, maybe twice a month or once a month or whatever, and then kind of build it as we go. But I think we just wanted to be able to give everyone access to a conversation that maybe they're not privy to or they don't have access to. And so hopefully as we do that, then we'll grow in community together. And we thought, what better way to do that than to use this medium that I think a lot of people utilize for things like that. So just to kind of deepen and broaden the conversations that we can have and to use a space, I think that's convenient for everybody. So
yeah, and that's going to be what we're going to be doing. And we are hoping that we're going to have guests and other people from Arche Ministry to show up to share a little about their lives and their wisdom here. Hopefully that'll continue. Yeah. Yeah,
and also when we have like guest pastors who come in and are speaking at different things, we'll be able to invite them in and have them hopefully join in on this podcast, and so kind of have different Q&A sessions, and also kind of ask them about what their experience has been in ministry, and also just to see if we can glean any wisdom from them. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a good platform and a good way to kind of just utilize a medium to have a conversation that maybe a lot of people can't have, and so hopefully it'll be good for people. It'll be enriching. It'll be good conversation. Also thought-provoking. We're not going to avoid, I think, the tough conversations. I think we're going to be able to have some good dialogue on things that maybe don't get talked about too often, and so hopefully we'll just have some good, honest conversations here. So
sure, yeah, we're ready and very excited for all of this. And so topic of today is going to be our ministry, particularly that intergenerational component. So Pastor Pete, could you tell me a little bit about that and why you think this is the right way to do this?
I think to answer that, we have to kind of go back to the beginning or kind of at the genesis. I'm 35. I've been a part of Korean American churches, pretty much my entire life. And one thing that I think most Korean Americans will say is that, Korean Americans are really good at a lot of things, especially the Korean American church, and we're good at like splitting, and we're good at not being able to hold on to the next generation. And so most, particularly bigger Korean churches, they're having issues with, what do they do with their students after they graduate high school and so on and so forth. There was kind of this, silent exodus thing that happened a while back where all the, college kids and young adults were kind of leaving the church and going to other churches or just leaving the faith altogether. So when I came down to Houston 6 years ago, my friends and I from seminary and just, good friends that I had, we were discussing like, what can we do to actually create longevity, to actually create a healthy Korean American church? What does that look like? And maybe kind of avoid some of the patterns that we've kind of seen in the past or, kind of we've experienced or that we've all kind of grown up with. So as we thought about that, I did a lot of research. I contacted a lot of people. There are a lot of pastors, mentors of mine that I look up to. And in kind of doing the research and looking at it, I thought, we have to maybe get away from this understanding of kind of segmented and compartmentalized ministry. I think that we as Koreans, we love specializing in stuff. Like we love, sending kids to like hagwons and academies for specific things. But we think that becoming a unified church is kind of, the end goal and what we want to do. And as in the process, I really felt strongly at one point that God was saying to me that there is a specific kind of a message or an action or a calling that God has for the Korean American church specifically that we can only say and or do as a unified Korean American church, which means both the Korean speaking sector, our parents, our grandparents, and also the English speaking kind of second gen and third gen and beyond. And so I thought, is there a way for us to actually do this well and to have a church that's actually united? And so kind of in doing so, we felt like, in doing the research, we felt like the way to really go about it is particularly here in Houston, because our senior pastor is a proponent of intergenerational ministry. We thought this is the way to go. And so he's been the one who's backing it all. And I've been kind of, the one maybe championing it, for us and trying to, understand what it means, just kind of building it one by one. I don't even know if we're doing necessarily a great job at it. We're just kind of taking it one step at a time and seeing what comes. So,
yeah. Awesome. I was wondering a little bit about, we're seeing Arche moving from, it used to be just strictly a youth ministry. Now we've incorporated college students, and, we're seeing a good handful of adults as well. When or, how do you think we'll be able to incorporate children's ministry into this?
I think for me, the way that I look at the Korean American church, so like the Korean American church, when I was in seminary and just growing up, we've always had this understanding that no matter what we do for probably a long time, if not forever, it seems like our adults are always going to speak Korean and we're going to speak English. So there's always this language barrier and there's always this divide culturally and generationally, all that kind of stuff. And so the children have always kind of been the connecting sector of these two, sections, Korean and American, or Korean and English speaking, excuse me. And so in doing so, I think we've always realized, and most people's kind of way to connect it is the English ministry or the youth ministry, or however you kind of, divvy it up. And so for us, I think with the children's ministry, I think our church in the long run, we're talking, we don't know how many years it's going to take, but I think our church is going to kind of have like three major components. We're going to have the Korean speaking component. We'll have the English speaking component, which for us means everyone from middle school all the way up to anyone who speaks English, all the way to the adult. And then we'll have our children component, which will be preschool and the elementary age up until like 5th grade. And so we feel like in our particular context, especially because we're still an immigrant church and a lot of our students still speak Korean at the younger elementary age, middle school is a time where we can really get together and have a very vibrant ministry, vibrant worship together, where we can still preach in such a way where we don't have to do multiple sermons for different age groups. But we feel like once you get to the children's level, then you're going to have to start, doing special things for them. And so I think the way that we're envisioning it as a church, it could change, but I think right now the way that we envision it is to have the Korean speaking sector, and then the English-speaking sector, which is us, intergenerational as Arche, and then obviously the children's sector, kind of as not under, but kind of like undergirding the whole thing, kind of as the connecting sector of the whole
more
thing.
More like a foundation kind of thing for the future.
Exactly.
Yeah, you mentioned language barriers being kind of like an obstacle between KM and EM. Is there any other obstacles potentially that you see with the intergenerational church, especially in Arche?
Yeah, I think part of it is the culture. Korean Americans have a very strong culture, particularly as immigrants here in this country, and so I think we've all grown up with this idea that, when you're in youth group, when you're in college, you have a college group, and so on and so forth. And to kind of bring all that together has been a bit more of a challenge than I anticipated originally. And so I think there's a bit of that kind of long history of this culture that we have. And so to break it all down and to have ministries spanning from middle school all the way on up has actually been a kind of like a mental challenge, kind of like this paradigm challenge of trying to get people to see that that's actually a good thing, that the middle school kids won't be like overshadowed or overlooked, or they won't, kind of have the sermons won't go over their head, and then the adults won't feel like the whole thing is like catered towards kind of a sugar coated or kind of dumbed down kind of version. And so I think we've been able to establish that that's not really the case up until this point, but I think that's definitely one of the challenges. And then the other challenge I think is just kind of as you grow, how do we as an intergenerational English ministry start to take care of our older Korean ministry? Because one thing that I've always thought about and where a lot of this started was, I remember I was having a conversation with my dad one day and he said, who's going to take care of me when I become like 70? Are they just going to keep pumping, pastors from Korea to America, or are you actually going to do something to take care of me? And so back in those days, my Korean was pretty terrible, and so he was very concerned. Thankfully, by God's grace, my Korean's gotten a lot better. So I think that's kind of some of the things that we're looking at. But I think that's another one of the things that we're trying to think about in terms of what we can do. And so there's those challenges, and then also just kind of, I would say, how do you say this without maybe sounding offensive, but like kind of the paradigm shift of saying if the English ministry is indeed the future, which is a lot of what of our first generation or kind of like senior pastors are saying, then how do we actually show that? And then I think the bigger concern for me is how do we as the English ministry, second gen, show that yes, we are the future and we should have, some sort of ownership or whatever, but still be very subservient and kind of submissive, right? In a godly way to our elders and to the older church, and really respecting them and honoring them for all the work that they've done to kind of put us in this position. And so I think those are some of the unique challenges, and then just kind of mapping those cultures together. I think for me, like I've always said, that our church, or Korean American church, is one of the most diverse and beautiful places you'll see kind of in the country. On a Sunday morning, if you come to the church, then you'll have people from like 2 months old all the way to like whatever, like 90 at our church. I think it's like 93 is the oldest member.
Oh, really?
Right.
Wow.
And so you have all of those, and you have all the cultures, and you have like generational culture, and then you have 2 languages, sometimes even more than 2 languages, depending. And then you have like people who grew up in the States their entire lives, but you also have, even within like the youth ministry, you have people who grew up in Korea and they came later. So like you have all these different diverging things that have to come together under the name of one God. And so I think that's a fantastic, kind of just a superb image of I think what the kingdom looks like. And so I think the challenge is, how do we bring all this diversity together, even though we're all Korean in ethnicity, into this place and actually become a body and become a church and become a family. So I think those are kind of the most unique challenges I think we have going forward. So.
Yeah. I love how you mentioned how culture is a big proponent of this, because, if you just look at us as people, we all look Korean. We all look just like that physically, but in terms of like the language barriers, how we grew up, what were some of the rules that were instilled at home, and how that differed to when,
right.
Kids start going to school. I think that is incredibly important to note for the future of
right.
Arche in terms of the intergeneration.
Yeah, like it's interesting for me because some of us are like really American, but I think Korean Americans, I think sociologists will all agree generally, if you read them, that Korean Americans are this random kind of hybrid people. Like, we're not actually fully Korean and we're not fully American.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like we don't know, and each and every single person, based on their history, is kind of a mixture. And it's crude, but if you kind of broke it up like numbers, like maybe I might be 60-40, like 60% Korean, 40% American, or whatever, that kind of a thing. And every single person is a little different. Like, I had the opportunity, I was basically adopted by a white family, and so I actually got to live like in a white home and like American, like totally American home and things like that. And so I'm more Americanized than maybe most people that I know that are Korean American. But so I have kind of this different mix, but every single person has a different mix. And so that, incorporating that, understanding that, and then even like amongst their parents, I think we all assume that they're all the same, but they're not. It depends. If they're educated here in the States, they're very different from those who are educated in Korea, and things of that nature. And then also the thing that I look at is like, some people are old enough where they might have actually lived through the Japanese like imprisonment, and that does a number in terms of on who you are. And so you have all these diverging cultures and all these diverging histories, and somehow we have to try to bring all of that, and the way that God has played, and the way that God has directed their stories, right, and their narratives, and somehow in one kind of a building, unfortunately, but in one place, these many people and those many different stories have to, converge together and create one family under God. And so it is this exercise in creating unity out of one of the more diverse and kind of, like crazy, like, cultural things, centers that we'll have maybe in our country. And so I think most ethnic churches in America are like that. And so how do we get that kind of diversity and almost kind of opposition, if you depending on how you look at it, to come together and say, we all love Jesus and we're all one God and we're all one family under one God, and we all worship together. So I think that's the unique challenges. And then of course there's like the challenges of like, me working with my senior pastor, who's great, and he's the main reason why we can do all of this, because of his culture and his attitude and the way that he sees and his support. But that's also kind of another dynamic there. So just a whole bunch of stuff. But I think that's kind of this interesting, cultural bit that we simplify to say, oh, we're Korean, so we're just all Korean, and that's good. But I don't think that's actually doing it justice in terms of like how much diversity there is in the building. So
yeah, I think that's a lot. That was a lot of great things. What do you think? So building off of that, this idea that that the EM ministry is going to be the future, but in that we are humble in it and taking care of the older Korean, the KM ministry. What do you think will be the KM's reaction to this?
For me, I think growing up, I think if we're just honest, I think at least when I was in college, I think that's kind of how we all act. Like we looked at our parents as if they were kind of stupid, idiotic, uncultured, archaic, or whatever the word is, right? Like, oh, you don't know anything, you don't speak the language, you don't know anything, blah, blah, blah. But when I look at them, one thing I try to tell our students and tell young people is, I try to look at them and go, the fact that you're here and your parents are still alive and doing their thing, like, your parents are pioneers. They're not normal people, right? They took a very specific type of Korean from Korea to come over to this country, give up everything and build the kind of lives. Like, in Korean, we call it like dokhae, like they're very strong and they have this like thing, this fire that most people just don't have. And so that's who we're dealing with in terms of our parents, right? And so the way I look at the church, like even our church, KCPC, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year, and our senior pastor, EJ Moksanim, he's been the senior pastor for I think 33 or 34, some crazy number. He's been at the church for like 36 or 37 of those years, right? Can you imagine what Houston, Texas was like 35 years ago? And how many Korean people there were? Like, there's still kind of some subversive racism, depending on what parts of the city that you go into. But can you imagine what it must have been like for him to be the pastor of a Korean church in this city? Like, it's just insane. And now we have this, massive community, and we have all these people and all these resources. And so I think the way that we do so is to say, if you're going to hand us the baton or whatever, the baton, if you don't want to use that language, then we want to do so in a way where we honor the tradition and honor the work and the blood, sweat, and tears that got us here. And we want to do so, and we want to live into those things, and then we want to take care of you. And we want to uphold you and uplift you, and then try to, if you know anything about me, my mother-in-law lives with us in our house, and one of the things that I told her when she came, and the reason why we're hosting her and we want her to live with us, I said, I want us to be able to provide you, if possible, the happiest years of your life from now until whenever God calls you. And so it's honoring how much work it took to get us here, how much just the grind and the hustle to get us here. And so to honor this. So for us in the church, the way I look at it is I want to honor their prayer life. Like, one of the dreams that I have is at our young people's retreats, I want to be able to invite our kwansanim, our elderly women who've literally made a life off of prayer, right? That's all they do, and have them come and sit in the back or sit wherever in the sanctuary and just pray. Say, go sleep, go eat, go hang out, and then when it's time, come and pray. And then I would love for our students, even if they can't understand the words coming out of their mouth, prayer is different than just kind of a earthly language, for them to be able to go and receive prayer in such a way. Like that's what our churches and our homes in many ways are built off of, if we're just being honest, right? And so that's when we honor them. We honor their hard work. We honor the amount of just craziness it took to get us to this place. And so I think there's a way to do that, and to say we love and we are who we are because of you, and we have no intention or desire of trying to eliminate the things that you've done. We just want to take it and really build off of it. And so I want to be able to do so. And then I think that also the way that we do it is in every way, kind of in almost a reverence to what my senior pastor has done. So I think one thing about baptism, I think until he retires, I would love for every single person at our church to be baptized under him, because I think it's a privilege. My own children, two of my own children, were baptized by him, and so that's the thing. The way we this is our church, and one thing it means to be a member of our church, or even especially infant baptisms and stuff like that, is you get baptized by our senior pastor because he's the leader of our church, and we honor him that way. Things like that, right? And so I think there's going to be an interplay. There's going to be kind of a give and take, and I've already kind of seen that with senior pastor, and so I think those are some of the things that we can do really well, and to say we respect, and not only respect, we just freaking just are just overwhelmed by the work and the love that you have for us and how much you've poured out in us. And I think there's a way that we can do that without saying, oh, your methodology is archaic or whatever. Respecting the grind and respecting the tradition that they've built up, I think is something that we don't do as well as second gen. And so figuring out ways to do that, and then at the same time taking the kind of the responsibility that they're willing to give to us and kind of earning it. I think the way I look at it is John, you're 23. And so, as you kind of grow up in college, at some point your parents didn't give you a whole lot of responsibility because they didn't think you were ready for it, right? But then the moment they kind of see that you're ready for it, they'll give you everything, right? But then we kind of have to almost earn it. And I know we don't like that in our sensibility as second gens, I don't want to earn it, why don't you just give it to me? But on some level, that's how it always works. You have to kind of show that you can handle it, right? No one's going to hand you a car if you don't know how to drive. And no one's going to hand you a really nice car, right, if you can't prove that you can drive it. No one's going to hand you a manual car, like a stick car, if you can't prove that you can drive it. And so I think that's kind of thing is, if we can prove, in that sense, earn it, that we can really take care of this church and we have the same mindset, I think they're willing to give us pretty much anything we want, and to say, the whole world and everything that we built, it's all yours, because it's always for you anyway. So yeah. I think those are some of the things I think we're trying to do here.
Exactly. I think you really described thoroughly the struggles that we'll see in trying to strive for this intergenerational ministry. But then I think you've also captured a very clear solution in terms of honoring and loving each other as one body under Christ, in ways where it's like, yeah, we're seeking to love each other in ways that it will expand our ministries, especially, and empower the younger generation, empower the EM ministry, to, like you say, take the baton to continue living our lives.
And then, I think one thing that I don't know where this idea came from, but it dawned on me one day, and I kind of started dreaming, and I realized that we have all these young people like you and others in their mid-20s, late 20s now. What does it look like when they become our deacons and our elders and people like that, right? Can we have them follow the polity and kind of the tradition of our church, right? In Korean, we say, there's Hori-jipsa, there's Ansu-jipsa, and then there's Changno, Konza, right? And so you have these different levels and there's different kind of like tiers of responsibility and ownership. And so can we have our people just fit right into that and say, we want to be like total KCPC all the way. Like, this is who we are. And so when you go under membership and you go through membership, then you're on your track to becoming a Hori-jipsa and then an Ansu-jipsa and so on and so forth. And so I think that's another way where we honor them and saying, this system, for me, I'm like, I'm not going to reinvent a system that I think has been working. Again, we're celebrating 40 years this year. That's insane. So how can we be a part of that and really honor that, but also kind of claim it as our own and say, this is our legacy, this is our tradition, right? I think like if I, now that I have kids and Mason is 8 and Connor's 6 and Kara's 4, they're going to carry some traditions that we've started. And when they get older, they're going to carry them. It's going to be with them. And so I think that's kind of one way is like, how do we take what they've done and really take the best of what they've done and just claim it as our own and saying, this is our heritage and this is the honor that we have from them, and then be able to live that out. And so some of those things, I think, that are things that we're thinking of as a ministry in continually becoming not only more intergenerational, but also unified as a Korean American church here at KCPC.
Yeah, great. Good stuff. I mean, this intergenerational ministry, this idea is not very common. And so I wanted to ask, like, what do you think will be some of like the other churches' reactions, like other Korean American churches, when they see us and how we do things a little differently?
I'm hoping, I don't know what they're going to think, but I'm hoping that what they see is that this quote unquote model, I don't like that word, but we'll use it. It fits for us. It fits because of, I think, the vision that senior pastor has and always had, in my 6 years here anyway. I think it fits because of, I think, who I am and kind of the way that we grew up. And then I think also it fits because we've undergone some pain and some difficulty, and we don't want to repeat that again. And we want to be able to build a healthy church. And so, and I hope the other thing that people will see is that this is a picture of unity that I think, at least for the Korean American church, that I think we can say is a healthy one. I don't know. I don't think we would say, or we can say, that this is going to work for everybody and everyone should do it. I don't think we're going to say that, because I think where your city, and I think one thing I'm learning is where you are, your city, the people, and all that kind of stuff really plays a role in terms of how you, I think, understand what God is calling you to, right? And so, but I hope what they see is that they see a church that's willing to put in the work and do some of the difficult things to really try to become one and see what that looks like. Like things like, what does it look like when our members of our entire church actually go on missions together? You have elderly, you have middle-aged people, you have young adults, you have Korean speaking, English speaking, so on and so forth. What does that look like? And what are we going to be able to? How are we going to be able to exemplify the gospel in and through our own story as a Korean American church, stuff like that. And so I'm hoping the other churches, if they are going to look at us, will see that there is a respect, there's a love, I think a tenderness that we have within the building. I remember, I think maybe this story will kind of do it justice. I remember a few years ago, I was walking in, and on every Saturday morning we have this kind of older elderly ministry. It's called Sangmokdayak. And if we're just being honest, actually this is just a fact. Not all of them go to our church. This is elderly from all over Houston, and they come every Saturday, and we host this ministry for them. And so actually, if we're being honest, I don't know who all the elderly are, and I don't know who go to our church. Not all of them. I know some. And I was walking kind of in and out of the building, walking over to our sector, the campus, and I was walking in through the door, and I had forgotten my key. And so that door was locked. And so someone opened it, and it was an elderly gentleman, and I had no idea who he was. I had seen him one time before, but again, it was on Saturday, and so he could be anybody. And I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, the kind of another elderly person in that corner looked at that person and said, who is that? And then he chimed up and said, "Oh, that's one of our associate pastors. That's Peter Chung. That's Peter Chung Moksanim." And for me, more so than the embarrassment of like, I have no idea who you are, and I just said, oh, 안녕하세요, and I walked away, I felt like, oh, I'm home now. I'm not like some EM pastor. I'm not whatever. The title of, or the recognition of being called Pumoksa, associate pastor at a Korean American church like that, and for him to know who I am, even though I primarily work with quote unquote second gen, young people, was for me like this understanding of we're becoming one, and we're becoming this one church. And he was almost like telling this other person who doesn't go to our church, I don't think that this is one of my pastors, right? He said this is our Pumoksa. And so I think that's kind of what I hope they see, is that there is this intergenerational, unified, like tenderness that we have for everyone. This is our church, and everyone in the building, young and old, those are our people, and those are our pastors, and those are our elders, and those are our so-and-so. And so hopefully, I think that's what I hope they see, and that there is less kind of this idea of like establishing who we are as just kind of our individuality in terms of our ministry, but that we will see ourselves through the lens of what it means to be KCPC. So hopefully that's what they'll see.
Yeah, I mean, kind of transitions really well to the last part of the topic of discussion, which is dreaming. Like, you and I, both dreamers, we've had a good handful of conversations of what we see for the future of Arche in this intergenerational ministry. Could you share a little bit about your dreams for all of this?
Yeah, well, some personal dreams that I have. This may sound crazy, but I really hope, and I'm praying, if God allows it and the people allow it, that I'll be able to retire here. Not because I'm great, or not because I do anything all that particularly fantastic, but I think the longevity is going to say something in terms of who we become as a church. I'm jealous. My senior pastor is going to retire after, oh Lord, like 40 some years of service, in however many years he has left. And so I think, for me, that's a personal dream of mine, to be able to raise my kids and our family here, and for us to become that family. In terms of as a church, I think really what I'm hoping for is, a church that really feels like home and really feels like a family. One of the things that we started doing, a couple years ago, last year, is that we started, I challenged our ministry, which is still, fairly young people, middle school, high school, all the way up to young adults, to prepare the Sunday meal for the entire church, which is for 1,500 people, right? And we did that. And one of the reasons why we did that is because that's what it means to be family, right? Like, I fully expect Mason and Connor, and then when they get a little older, to start pitching in just to help out with our Thanksgiving meals, and starting doing that. And so, like, things like that. And so that's a part of our dream. Part of our dream is that, depending on kind of what other dynamics look like, our session will be represented by both Korean American, or Korean and Korean speaking, and English speaking people, to represent the whole church as the way it's supposed to be. My dream are things like when we have our deacons, like when all the deacons get together. I forget what they call it in Korean, but they have like a deacon board, right? And then they all get together and they have special projects that it'll include both Korean and English speaking, so that they're all really doing what's best for the church. My dream is things like we'll have multiple times a year these joint services, the all church services, that where you walk in, or if you were to visit for the first time that day, you just happened to come on a day where we had one of those, that you would get a taste of what KCPC is. You'd get a taste for all the little kids, and like, the beauty of who they are, and also just somehow, they're also annoying and can be, right? Like, all those beauties, and then also like kind of, the young people and kind of the vibrancy of that, but also the deep, profound faith. And I think, the perseverance of like our, elderly sector, and so on and so forth, that kind of something like that. And then also I think just a dream that I have is, as we do this, then there will be much healthier and reconciled family units. As I do young people ministry, one thing that I recognize is there's a lot of brokenness in our homes. And I'm not saying that I'm not excusing our parents, but man, they had it rough. They're trying to earn a living, in a country that they don't know, speaking a language that they're not familiar with, right? Just trying to put it all together. Like, it's difficult raising my family, and I've grown up here, and there's a lot of, good and bad and all that kind of stuff. And so can you imagine how difficult it must have been for them? And so, not to excuse them in any way, but there's so much difficulty that they went through. And so it's caused a lot of brokenness, a lot of fraction, right, in our families. And I think everyone kind of has these stories. Can we be a church maybe years on down the road where we start to see God redeem that, and we have healthy family units? And then kind of the next generation of family, which is like people like me, and we have third gen or whatever, so on and forth, that will have very healthy families that have a lot of those past hurts and pains, redeemed, and that we have these, like beautiful family units kind of. So our church is one big family made up of all these very healthy family units. And so those are kind of the dreams that I have. I dream of things like whenever senior pastor retires. I don't want him to retire because I love the man, but he's going to have to retire one day, right? I'm sure. And so when that happens, that we'll be really able to send him off and really say, we're so thankful for what you've done, and we're going to carry on your hope and your prayer and the thing that God has done in you. So stuff like that, right? And so this place where everyone feels like they're home and everyone feels that they're loved, and we won't be thinking about language barriers, but more so we'll just be thinking about how can we really just love, and those are my elderly, and those are my children, and all that kind of stuff. And so those are kind of, I think, the dreams that we have in terms of what we're going to look like. Less segmentation, much more just kind of fluid unity that we have, and kind of one way of identifying, I think every church, so if you go, oh, where do you go to church? I go to, so-and-so. And I think most churches kind of have like a thing. They have a culture. They have a couple of things, I think. And maybe my dream is that in the end, or as we get closer, that no matter who you ask, no matter what age sector you ask, that they'll all be able to tell you like what makes KCPC, right? That this is who we are. And they would all be able to say the same thing, right? That you wouldn't get diverging answers from the Korean sector versus the English sector, right? That you would get this very unified picture of who we are. We're a church, whatever, it manifests into, but we're a church that loves Jesus and loves the world, and this is how we like to do, and this is what it means to be a person at Central or KCPC. So those are some of the dreams I think that we have, and it's going to require a lot of work, but I think we're slowly and steadily getting there, and it's going to be fun to kind of grow old and to see kind of what that looks like, and to see like y'all get older. And then one last dream that I have is just to see multiple generations. If I'm fortunate, I might be able to see kind of 4 generations alive at the same church at the same time, right? And for me to have been an active participant in all of that. Our host Chris is squirming over here. I don't know why. He's making weird noises out here, but to see like 4 generations, right? To see the elders that I know now that are about to retire, to see their kids who are in our ministry now, for them to have kids, and then maybe they'll grow up and get married and I'll be a part of their wedding, just even in a prayer mode or whatever. And then to see them have kids, like to be a part of that 4 generations would be, I don't know, for me, that's like, that makes my heart like kind of just dance. Cause I'm like, man, what a privilege to be able to do that. And so those are just some of the dreams I think that we have as a church. And again, only when you become really unified and really become a church, I think, are those things possible. And so hopefully we'll be able to see that come to fruition. So
yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Hopefully this is an avenue in which we can continue to like encourage that unity between generations.
Yeah.
So yeah, that wraps up our very first podcast. Not too shabby for a couple of dudes that barely gotten any sleep.
Yeah, hopefully it'll get better. The voice quality will also get better. My voice sounds pretty terrible or whatever. But and then also I think just the topic of conversation, hopefully this is something that people wanted to talk about. But I'm sure as we develop this, and there'll be some topics of conversation. I'm excited for the different things that we'll talk about. We'll be able to bring in a lot of our young professionals, and we'll be able to talk about like college life, or some of the people who are going away. We'll probably have like a special like entering college podcast. We'll also have one for like people who are adjusting into professional life, people who are getting married and
dating, all that fun stuff.
So there's a plethora, right? Just a myriad of possibilities, and so I think it's going to be really fun. So Chris, good luck trying to organize all these things and keep all these things together.
Look at what he got himself into.
I know, and then hopefully the conversation will also include, and then also like just to diversify the conversation with females and just kind of like people of all ages. So I think it's going to be really fun. So I'm excited. Thank you for hosting, John. Wonderful job. Thank you for Chris for producing and editing or doing whatever it is that you do.
Everything else.
Everything else. Yeah.
This is why we pay him the big bucks.
Yeah, setting it up, shutting it down, and all those things. And so, yeah, thank you. Stay tuned for the next one, whatever that may be. And again, if you have any suggestions on what the podcast name should be, you can Facebook message us at the ministry Facebook page, or you can send an email to archekcpch@gmail.com, and then or comment on these podcasts or whatever, and then hopefully we'll have those things ready. It's Saturday night. It's late and
way past my bedtime.
Yeah, we have a long day tomorrow, but we're excited. So thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.